Good afternoon. Last night, Washingtonians certainly had their voices heard, and it was loud and clear. I am deeply honored by this vote of confidence in our administration and this tremendous potential to serve as a third-term governor for the great state of Washington. I've appreciated people who've sent me their good wishes, and I hope people also understand the great work of all the people who work in our administration, who've worked so hard to help people in their daily lives across the state. And I want to thank them for their work as well. I think the vote of the people is something all of the state employees in my administration ought to take some pride in, and I thank them for their work. This is a historic election, and it gives all elected officials a paramount obligation towards our posterity when we are elected, to everyone's physical well-being, to their economic health, to the preservation of the democratic principles upon which we all stand, and into our aspirations for our state and our nation. So I want to give my congratulations to the legislative Democrats as they appear headed to increasing their numbers in the House and most likely our Senate as well. State voters will be sending more women and more representatives of color to our legislature. Representation matters, and this is something I think we should be proud of in our state. I am very happy to follow these election results in the legislative body with great interest over the upcoming days, and I know folks will want to see the final results. So thank you to all the legislators for the work they're doing as legislators. And thank the candidates who were not successful, who put themselves on the line to try to advance their ideas for our state. They all deserve respect for being in these races, win, lose, or draw. I'd like to congratulate Attorney General Bob Ferguson, Lieutenant Governor-elect Danny Heck, Superintendent Chris Reykdal, Lands Commissioner Hillary Franz, State Auditor Pat McCarthy, Treasurer-elect Mike Pelliciotti, and Insurance Commissioner Mike Kreidler. I want to thank Mark Elias, who had a spirited run, and look forward to working with him. I'd also like to congratulate my state Supreme Court appointees, Raquel Montoya Lewis and G. Helen Whitner, on their resounding electoral victories, and they really were resounding. We continue to have the most diverse Supreme Court in the United States and during our history. And I think it's good to see such respect shown from their work by the voters of the state of Washington. We're still waiting on clear results in the Secretary of State's race, but both Kim Wyman and Gail Tarleton deserve congratulations for a hard-fought race. And we will congratulate the winner when all the votes are counted. Congratulations to Marilyn Strickland as well, who will be the first Black person to represent Washington State in the United States Congress, and the first Korean American ever elected to the United States Congress. I also want to thank Beth Dolio for her work, years of service in the legislature. She ran a spirited race, and I am going to miss working with her in the legislature. I know that she will be doing more public spirited work in the years to come. I just want to touch on the current state of these races, particularly the presidential race. Our state, of course, is just one of the 50 states who cast votes in this election. All of them count. We know that a number of valid ballots are still being counted. Some races are undecided across the United States. And I just think there is something we all need right now during this process. We all need a good, healthy dose of patience. In this case, in democracy, while we're counting the valid ballots, patience is a virtue. It is a most important virtue. It's also a difficult one while we're all waiting for the final results. So this kind of process we're in is anxiety producing, but it is normal and it is healthy for democracy to make sure we count all the valid ballots. We may not know the results of the presidency on a final basis for some period of time. I will say the math clearly favors rather strongly Joe Biden in the race right now. I do believe at the end of the day that Joe Biden will serve as the next president of the United States. But during that period, until that's resolved, we're going to be patient. I hope everybody is while we work through this process. I do have faith in the state and local officials around the country for running these elections fairly. And we look forward to counting the ballots. I also think there's really a great day for our state and our country yesterday and during the weeks leading up to that day, because more Americans voted early and by mail than ever before. And that happened during the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Those votes were valid, duly cast, and must be counted, even if it does take time. We know states control elections, not the federal government. And we know that more voices in the chorus to protect American democracy are necessary. And that's important right now when, unfortunately, we have a president who is making baseless claims about legally cast ballots that must be counted in accordance with the law. Every legal ballot needs to be counted. And I'm calling on every elected official in the state of Washington, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, whatever party, to condemn any threats by the president to this process of counting the ballots. In our state, this is an important issue because as we speak, valid, legally cast ballots for both parties have been received or are being received, and we need to count them. And I will just say for the President of the United States, that ballots that are received by the auditors today should not be counted. That's just wrong. That is just flat wrong. That contravenes Washington state law. And we will not allow the president to stop us from counting those valid ballots in the state of Washington. I may note that a number of those ballots are from people serving in our armed forces overseas at this moment too. And I do not agree with the president's apparent attempt to refuse to count ballots cast by our service personnel that are validly cast. So too many people have been silent for too long about this president's behavior. We need voices to speak up to protect our voting here in the state of Washington. Now, there is significant things at stake, obviously, in the presidential race. What is at stake, in part, is the health of our state and our planet. Today formally ended our nation's participation in the Paris Agreement on climate change. That agreement has been supported by every other country on the planet Earth. The next administration could bring us back into a crucial partnership which supports the health of our people, the health of our children, the health of our state, and at the same time encourages investment in sustainable industries that can create clean energy jobs. But even if our nation re-enters the agreement, there is much work to be done in our nation and in our state and around the world on saving the health of our people against the scourge of climate change. And we know, and we are very confident, that we will create clean energy jobs by the bucketful in our state when we fulfill that obligation and that economic opportunity. So with that, happy to stand for your questions.
Yeah, up first, we'll go to Rachel LaCourte with AP. Go ahead, Rachel.
Governor, have you spoken with Lauren Culp since the race was called for you last night? And are you aware that he says he won't concede?
No, I have not spoken to him. I've heard press reports about his concession or non-concession, but frankly, that's sort of immaterial. The voters are going to decide who the next governor is, not Mr. Culp. So that's a bit immaterial. I think the vote was quite overwhelming, and the voters spoke quite loudly yesterday in support of our ongoing efforts. So I'm very pleased with that result. He has said some other things that are disturbing to me that he has not told me, but I've seen it in the press reports, that he has claimed that there are irregularities in the vote. I see no evidence of that. I think it is grossly irresponsible for a candidate to sow doubt about the ballots when he has absolutely no evidence of that. The Secretary of State has made it clear to us that there's no evidence of irregularity. And I think this is important at this moment because we need trust in this system, particularly when the president has tried to sow distrust in the system. We need public officials to help people exercise patience and respect the integrity of the system. So I'm disappointed in my former opponent's position in that regard.
Rachel, did you want to ask a follow-up question?
Yes, as you noted, the presidential race is still undecided, but if Joe Biden does ultimately win, have you changed your thinking on whether you would accept a position with the administration? You previously had been a definitive no, so I'm wondering if that has changed.
That remains my position.
All right, up next, we will go to Hannah Scott with Cairo Radio. Go ahead, Hannah.
Governor, I know that you had such a victory in your third term.
Hannah, could you speak up? I'm sorry, you're very distant.
Sure. Is this better?
Yes, thank you.
You bet. Now that you've secured your third term, once we get all of the election things out of the way and you start your third term, what are your priorities for the next 4 years?
Well, this is a long discussion, but briefly to knock down the COVID pandemic so that we can reopen our economy fully. That remains a current necessity for the state of Washington. I'm pleased that voters spoke loudly that they want to continue that work. I think these election results are most demonstrative of that fact. We need to have a balanced budget that I will propose in December. We need to develop clean energy jobs by fighting climate change, having cleaner fuels and transportation. We need to do more to reduce the homelessness that people are suffering in our state. We need to continue our efforts to reform our mental health care system. We need to embrace the desire and the thirst to end the racial inequities in our community. And I say community, not just in law enforcement. That's one of the reasons we've started an equity office in our administration. And I know there's 10,000 things that are all important beyond that, but that's a partial list.
Hannah, did you want to ask a follow-up question?
Yes, just quickly on the COVID situation. We've seen Snohomish County broke its record for daily cases yesterday, I believe. Pierce County just had another 214 cases today. What is the strategy going forward at this point?
Well, we're going to have Dr. Lofi and I hope John Weisman tomorrow to answer some of those questions. So I'd like to kind of defer questions about COVID till tomorrow to take a more comprehensive stab at answering that question, if that's okay. So we'll look forward to having a discussion tomorrow to answer that in a thorough basis, if that's okay. I will say that obviously we have real concerns about this. We are experiencing increased numbers, and we've got some more work to do.
All right. Up next, we'll go to Keith Eldridge with Como. Go ahead, Keith.
Governor, you had said that you don't see any irregularities, but Lauren Culp is stating that not every vote has been counted, and he wants to make sure every vote's counted. How can you assure people, you've already claimed that you're the next governor for 4 more years, how can you assure people that every vote will be counted?
Well, every vote will be counted. It's the law. It's going to happen. Dedicated people are counting them as we speak. I'm confident the Republican Secretary of State will assure that every vote will be counted. It's just that I can do math, and it is virtually impossible for my opponent to prevail with the most votes. And that has been there's unanimity on that subject about those who can add. So this decision has been quite dramatic. This is one of the largest differences in a governor's race in state history. And I'm pleased by that in a third term. The margins since I've been governor have increased every time I've run for governor. That is pleasing to me. And the voters have spoken. There's just no question about that. So yes, we're going to count every vote. And at the end of the day, it is a mathematical certainty that my numbers will be in excess of my opponents. That's just a given.
Keith, did you want to ask a follow-up question?
Governor, last night you said the vote was a mandate to continue your COVID-19 fight. Can you expand on that and where are you going to take the fight?
Well, I think that since there was such a dramatic differences in the approach of the candidates, my position is that COVID was a real threat to our health. We should respond in a scientifically credible way. And if we did that, we would save lives. And that involves having social distancing, masking up, and other reasonable measures. My opponent's position was that this was not a serious enough issue to merit wearing masks. He repeatedly exposed people himself to this pandemic and others in his rallies. So there was a very dramatic difference between the candidates. And one of the candidates got about 59% of the vote, and the other candidate got maybe 40%, maybe 41%. That is a huge difference. So it is clear that people chose to continue with our scientifically based program. And I do believe that's based on the success of that program. I think voters were aware that other places were experiencing horrendous losses, hospitals that were full, other states having to build pop-up hospitals, putting maybe hospitals in stadiums if they had to. We have avoided that fate. I think voters understood that we have had success because we have made decisions on a science-based basis. The opponent took a very different tack, and as with the president, diminished at every turn the necessity of trying to fight this pandemic. So this was a clear mandate to go one direction rather than the other. And I do believe the fundamental difference between our approaches is a willingness to confront a challenge. I really believe leaders need to step up, even when it's difficult, to confront challenges to our community, to confront danger and risk, even when it's controversial. Others take the position they want to hide from it and not step up to the plate. That's the position, frankly, that President Trump and my former opponent took. And so voters made a very clear decision. So I do believe it is a mandate to continue our scientifically based approach to this problem, and that we should take this seriously, and we should value the thousands of lives that we have already saved because of the work we've done, and the hundreds or thousands we are going to save if we continue on this path.
All right, up next we'll go to Joe Sullivan with the Seattle Times. Go ahead, Joe.
Governor, given that you view it as a mandate, what do you see next now in the next month or so where we're expecting to see the virus spike around the nation? What's next for controlling it here as we enter the winter?
Well, as I've indicated, we're going to answer a lot of questions about COVID tomorrow. I prefer to have Dr. Lofi here and John to answer those questions. So if you can defer 24 hours on that question, Joe, I think we'll all be in better position. We do have to take this very seriously given the increasing numbers, but I'll be happy to answer that question in detail tomorrow if that's okay, Joe.
Joe, did you want to ask a follow-up question?
No, thank you.
All right. Up next, we'll go to Jerry Cornfield with the Everett Herald. Go ahead, Jerry.
Governor, I think I might not want to wait another day if tomorrow you're going to announce new restrictions or rules. The election is over, and I mean, historically, you've been able to bend the curve in this state with restrictions, limits, a mask mandate, and there hasn't been anything announced in recent weeks as the surge has come. So should the public be bracing or preparing for some new restrictions on public life and business? And if not, why do you think you can bend the curve without them?
No, I don't think they should expect that. I do think, given the increasing rate that we have had, that we all recognize that in some sense we will need to change the status quo on the ability to reduce these transmissions. But as what I hope to talk about tomorrow is a way to do that may not involve additional legal restrictions. And there are many ways to do that. This is a pandemic where individual decisions are our best hope and to some degree our last hope in our ability to prevent transmission. And that happens in many, many environments. And those decisions are not necessarily mandated by law. So I intend to talk about this in more detail tomorrow.
Jerry, did you want to ask a follow-up question?
Yes, please. With the legislative the session coming up, a number of Democrats and organizations have been calling for a tax on wealth or capital gains tax, and some of the folks you supported in this election have been on record in that fashion as well. So, are you prepared to now say you will propose again, as you have in the past, a capital gains tax to help carry out some of the agenda you described earlier?
No, as we have discussed on a number of occasions, I will be proposing a balanced budget in December, and we will answer questions about the fiscal status of the state at that time. We are not in a position to answer those questions today because we need to look at our November forecast to find out what the situation of the state is. We need to talk to legislators and the public about what the right approach to our fiscal challenges are. And we haven't done those things. So you'll be confident to know our position here in early December, and we'll have an extended discussion about whatever proposal we make.
All right, up next, we'll go to Essex Porter with Cairo 7. Go ahead, Essex.
Governor, you mentioned President Trump and Lauren Culp saying things that undermine the confidence in our state and our system. If you have a chance to speak to their supporters directly, what would you say to reassure them?
Well, when I say that, we have a Republican Secretary of State, we have many auditors who are doing a good job counting the votes. And it's pretty simple. You get the ballot, you open it up, and you have people looking at it of both parties, and you see what it says. And then you tally up the votes. And there's not a lot of judgment involved in that. It's either this box is filled out or that box is filled out. And that's just happening all over the state of Washington. To my knowledge, there's not a single reported incident to suggest that any of those things are untoward or irregular. My opponent's assertion is totally without any evidence whatsoever that I'm aware of. We checked with the Republican Secretary of State this morning on that subject, and she assured us that there is no evidence, repeat, zero evidence of any irregularities in this process. And frankly, we have not suffered irregularities for years. We've done this really, really well, and it has served both Republicans and Democrats because we count all the votes. So I'm not saying that the result is going to please my opponent's supporters, because they may end up and will end up in the governor's race on the short end of the stick. But I can assure everybody that every vote's going to get counted. We're going to have the total. We'll have total transparency, and that person will take office. And when I take office, when I take the oath, I'm going to be working every bit as hard for my opponent's supporters as I am my supporters. These are great Washingtonians. They have families, they have dreams. They share a lot of my sentiment that we want good schools and good jobs and a healthy environment. And I'm going to be working to achieve that for them. I was over in Malden, a town that was burned down because of these fires that have been made worse by climate change. Look, I saw a lot of my opponent's yard signs there, but I'm working for those folks. I care about them. And I'm going to be working for them. So I'm looking forward to that.
Essex, did you want to ask a follow-up question?
No, thank you, Governor.
Okay.
Yeah, the other thing I would say to him, if I can just add to this, don't be making assertions where you have absolutely no basis to make them. Just don't do that. Nobody should do that. Police officers or judges or butchers, bakers, or candlesticks makers. It's dangerous. It diminishes the credibility of the democratic system, and it is a serious issue. We don't need that right now. We need patience and confidence in each other. That's what we need.
Up next, we'll go to Drew Mickelson with King 5. Go ahead, Drew.
Good afternoon, Governor. On the issue of a mandate, you feel the voters have spoken and fueling your concerns about the environment and climate change. Should citizens expect some sort of tax proposal to benefit some of those concerns that are so close to your heart?
No, we have not made proposals in that degree. In the past, I have supported some pricing system on carbon. Most recently, I did not. I proposed a different way to restrain carbon from the transportation system, a system that would require the fuel producers to give us cleaner fuels. This has been very effective in California. It would simply require that drivers be given cleaner fuel by law. And I have proposed that, and I will be proposing that measure in the next legislative session. Now, that is not a tax. It is a system that will assure consumers get cleaner fuels, and they deserve cleaner fuels. They deserve cleaner fuels because the pollution coming from the dirtier fuels is harming their children. We have almost an epidemic of asthma. We have fires made worse by climate change. We have great health threats from dirty transportation fuel. So I will be making a proposal to give consumers cleaner fuels.
Drew, did you want to ask a follow-up question?
Quick one. Have you spoken with Vice President Biden since the election?
No, I have not. But I've appreciated his responsible approach to this, where he has asked for every vote to be counted. He's asked for patience of Americans. And I think his assessment, if I understand it, is consistent with mine, that the odds at the moment are heavily favor that at the end of the day, after we count all the votes, that he will be the next president.
Okay, up next, we'll go to Ellis O'Neill with KUOW. Go ahead.
Hi, you mentioned this briefly, but I was wondering if you could expand a bit more on, now that the U.S. has left the Paris Climate Accords, what do you think that means for the people of Washington State?
Well, unfortunately, it means that under what I hope to be the former president, that we've abandoned, unfortunately, our leadership position in the world. We have refused, under his total lack of responsibility, to assume any role with partners of every other country in the world. Every other country in the world has made a commitment to act against climate change. And this has hurt the health of our children, because the United States is an absolutely necessary partner to any effort in the world to defeat climate change. Our children need our leadership, and our economy needs clean energy jobs. And the total lack of responsibility by President Trump, or former, hopefully, President Trump, hurt that, because it abdicated our ability to build clean energy jobs here in our state, in our nation. So I look forward, and I'm hopeful that President Biden, if he in fact does get the nod, that he will lead the world into a position to regain a leadership position in the United States. We're leaders. The world needs us. We are the most innovative, dynamic, dominant economy in the world. And if we're going to lick climate change, we need the United States. And I hope that we're going to regain that leadership position.
Alice, did you want to ask a follow-up?
No, thank you.
Okay. Up next, we'll go to Alexis Krell with the News Tribune. Go ahead, Alexis.
Governor, you spoke about your priorities for the next 4 years. I wonder, what are your immediate goals for the legislature that will convene in 2 months?
Well, all of the things I mentioned, it's like all our favorite children. I love all these legislative issues equally as our favorite child. All of them are things we can start working on day one. I'd be hopeful that early in the session we can pass some measures to give greater credibility to investigations of police and citizen violence. I would hope that we will be in a position to do that fairly quickly. Obviously, we'll want the legislature to knuckle down and look at the budget as fast as humanly possible. And all the things I mentioned have co-equal importance.
Alexis, did you want to ask a follow-up question?
No, thank you.
Okay, we've got time for one more, so we'll close with Jim Campen from the Spokesman Review. Go ahead, Jim.
Governor, it looks like you are going to have a slightly more Democratic legislature and probably a more progressive Democratic legislature. Is there anything that other than the clean fuel standard, which you mentioned, that you think might fare better with the 2021 legislature than you've had in the past couple of sessions?
Well, I think, assuming these votes hold, I think all of these things will be in better position. I am pleased about adding folks who are in the same position that I am on most, if not all, of these issues. So I think in general, it'll help all of these issues. And I hope that legislators will have confidence in their position. I think the results of these elections have shown that we're on the right track in the state of Washington. Look, 59 to 40 or 41 is an enormous difference. And that means that Washingtonians have confirmed their desire to go in this direction. It was not unanimous, but it was enormous. And that ought to give us some confidence to continue our work.
Jim, did you want to ask a follow-up question?
A parochial follow-up question, Governor. When might the folks in Stevens County find out about your appointments for county commissioner?
We're evaluating that. We've had recommendations, as you know, the way the process works. We get recommendations from Republicans in the community. We're looking at those and we're evaluating them. We're vetting them. We'll just make that decision as soon as we can. I can't give you what day that will be, but we are trying to get that done as soon as we can.
Any closing remarks?
No, I want to thank you. Again, thanks for everyone who voted. Thank you for your patience. We're going to have a good result here because people's will and the voters' will, I believe, be ultimately followed. And that'll be a good thing for all of us. Please be well.